post-game show, Tony Gonzalez brought up a point that was very salient. If that were my son, I would tell him to retire. All right, we're here. It's the Breer Report for September 13th. Week 2 is underway, and it is underway on a very somber note. I'm here in Miami, was at the game last night, and in attendance for the fourth known concussion of Tua Tagovailoa's career. The second time we've seen in 3 years where he's had the fencing response as a result of a concussion. And I can just tell you from being there last night how difficult this was all the way around. One thing that I was able to gather was with about 3 or 4 minutes left in the game, Tua's wife and his child left the locker room, ran into his brother there in the tunnel. And his wife relayed to his brother that Tua was okay, but certainly doesn't mean from a football standpoint, just that he's doing okay based on the circumstances. And after the game, same sort of tone in the Dolphins locker room. You've heard Mike McDaniel speak. Josh Allen on the other side of it talked about the human being Tua is, and just a scary, scary evening at Hard Rock Stadium. For those who missed it, the really just weird twist to the whole thing was that it was Damar Hamlin who Tua ran into in sustaining the concussion. So the Dolphins are going through the process today, and Tua obviously is now in the concussion protocol. A couple things that are significant here. Number one, he was diagnosed with a concussion, and the concussion was announced by the team 6 minutes after it happened. That's generally not the way that things happen in NFL games. Generally, when a guy has a head injury, it'll be deemed as such, a head injury. The guy will go out back. He'll be diagnosed. Sometimes you won't know the results of those tests until the next day. So the fact that he was diagnosed with a concussion 6 minutes after, or it was announced as a concussion 6 minutes after he sustained the blow, is significant. The other thing that's significant is what I referred to earlier as the fencing response, which is when you see the guy's fingers kind of move and go into almost a almost paralyzed state after a concussion. We saw it in that game against Cincinnati 2 years ago after he'd come back from what a lot of people felt like was a head injury 4 days earlier against these same Buffalo Bills. And to see the fencing response again, of course, was another scary element to this. What the fencing response is, it's an involuntary brain reaction. And it usually indicates there's been a serious brain injury, traumatic brain injury. So a lot of things at play here. Obviously, Tua just signed a big contract with the Dolphins. They've got a lot riding on him. All those things take a back seat now to Tua's health. One thing the Dolphins could do right away is put him on injured reserve, which would take him out for the next 4 weeks. The Dolphins' bye week is week 6. That would mean that he would get the next 3 games, and then the bye week, that would take the pressure off of everybody to give people answers on where he's at and get a full diagnosis for his condition. But certainly a scary moment and a lot of discussion after the game on where all of this is going to go now. I thought on our post-game show, Tony Gonzalez brought up a point that was very salient. He said, if that were my son, I would tell him to retire. And this is the guy who is, one of the greatest football players ever saying that. I think the presence of his wife, again, made it hit home for me that this isn't just Tua's decision. This is going to be a decision on the part of his family. And certainly where, in the days to come, we'll all be looking at different options for the Dolphins at the quarterback position. If Tua is out for a while, the conversation will turn back to football. Do they bring in Ryan Tannehill? Do they trade for a Mac Jones? All of those questions will be asked, and there'll be time for that. Right now, the focus is and has to be on Tua's health, and that's something that Mike McDaniel really drove home in his post-game press conference, explaining how he's most concerned about Tua Tagovailoa, the person. All right, topic number 2. On the other side of this, the Buffalo Bills played really, really well on Thursday night, and in their 31-10 win, Josh Allen didn't throw for even 200 yards. They rushed for just over 100 yards, but they were efficient. They were effective. This game was over late in the third quarter. And it was over because of the player Josh Allen is, some critical plays he made. There was the the throw on the third down to Ty Johnson that was huge in the first half. The plays that James Cook made, scoring the 3 touchdowns in the first half. But as much as anything, I think this was a win for player development in Buffalo, and the way that back seven played. We saw what Ed Oliver did and what Ed Oliver can do on Thursday night. You see Greg Russo's performance over the first couple of weeks of the season. Looks like he's becoming a high-end defensive end in the league. Really, the bigger questions were on the back end. And so seeing the plays that they were making at linebacker in the secondary, even after Terrell Bernard went down, without Matt Milano, who's injured again, with Tre'Davious White and Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer gone, I thought was really remarkable and a good sign of where the Buffalo Bills are going forward. So certainly, I think you come out of Thursday night saying if Buffalo isn't the top contender to Kansas City in the AFC, they're right there with the Cincinnati's and Baltimore's, even after all of the attrition of the offseason. Speaking of Cincinnati, that'll be where our third topic is. Biggest game of the weekend, without question, would be the Cincinnati Bengals going to Arrowhead to face the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bengals coming off that upset loss to the New England Patriots in week 1. This feels like a critical spot for the Bengals, even though they have struggled out of the gate the last few years and come out of all of that all right. And to me, where the Bengals are with T. Higgins not having practiced yet this week, with Jamar Chase just getting his feet underneath him, with Joe Burrow coming back off the wrist injury, is how the rest of the offense performs against the Chiefs, and then how the defense holds up after not playing real well in week 1. Lou Anarumo's defense got punched in the mouth by the Patriots. And so how are they going to react playing against a different type of offense in Kansas City? And then on the offensive side of the ball, again, I think it's almost about everybody except for the big names. It's about everybody except for Burrow and Chase and Higgins. How does Andre Ysivas play? How does Charlie Jones look? What does the running game look like with Zach Moss and Chase Brown? Where are they at tight end? Mike Gesicki had the drop, and Tanner Hudson had a fumble in week 1. It's going to be interesting to see the response from the Bengals here. And then on the Chiefs side, do they take another step on offense? The vision for what they're going to be offensively is a little different than what we saw in week 1, but you saw signs of it. And it's definitely different than what we've seen the last couple of years as they've won back-to-back Super Bowls. A couple of years ago, after a lot of teams played a lot of high coverage on them, they got bigger, more physical, and a little slower at receiver. They flipped that back around, bringing in Hollywood Brown, drafting Xavier Worthy, with the vision being that those two guys would be taking the top off of the defense, with Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice running underneath. We saw signs of it going that way, even though Holly Brown's hurt right now from Xavier Worthy in week 1. So what do we see from Xavier Worthy in week 2? How do the Bengals handle that? How do the Bengals handle what looks like a much improved Rashee Rice going into his second year? There are lots of cool elements in this game. And of course, if these two teams are as good as we thought they were coming into the year, this very well could determine where an AFC divisional round playoff or the AFC championship game itself, which this was the AFC championship game in 21 and 22, is being played, whether it's being played at Acor Stadium in Cincinnati or Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, where this one will be held. That's the Breer Report for September the 13th. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. We will see you on Tuesday.